Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so we are back with our coverage of the X-Men, and it's Tuesday, which means it's our day for ongoing videos. The videos that we split into parts, this is the day that we do those when we're covering Marvel Comics. Monday is DC Comics. So here's the thing, right? We are continuing Judgment Day, and this story is amazing. Man, let me tell you, check this out. Okay, so we actually get a countdown here. Now, one thing to know, everything that you're gonna see in this comic takes place over the span of 1 hour. So what this does is this initially picks up on the planet of Uranos, right? The Great Ring. Now, one thing to remember, the Great Ring is Uranos' version of the Quiet Council from Krakoa. For those of you guys who are unfamiliar with that, the Quiet Council on Krakoa is basically the governing body of pretty much all the Earthbound mutants that we're aware of. When you had like the whole Ten of Swords event and Jonathan Hickman's X-Men run, and you ended up learning that there was like a whole other dimension that had all these mutants that were in it, instead of them residing on Earth with the regular X-Men in Krakoa, they basically took off to Mars. That Uranos, the Great Ring, is their governing body. That one of the things to know is that the Great Ring is composed exclusively of Omega level mutants. There are no mutants on here that are not Omega level in power. That's why you have Iska the Unbeaten. That's why you have Cable, Magneto, different people like that. And then you actually have mutants that are from Uranos. So Aura Serrata, Ludos Logos, people like that, who's actually going to be really important as we get further into the story. But one of the things that happens here is Abigail Brand shows up literally with 1 minute left and basically tells them like, okay, there's a war breaking out between the Eternals, the Avengers, and the X-Men. Just so you guys know, we need to have some kind of involvement in this, right? We need to send our forces to Earth in order to ally with the Krakoan mutants to basically defeat the Eternals, because the Eternals are so astronomically powerful, and then defend off against the X-Men. Now, one of the things to know is that Abigail Brand's presence here is not really welcome. Technically speaking, she is the director of SWORD, the Sentient World Observation and Response Department, but much like Nick Fury when it comes to S.H.I.E.L.D., she's kinda shady. And the thing about this is that she actually wanted to install spies in Uranos that would basically feed her information, which basically became public knowledge. But the thing about this is that as she's basically communicating this message, and as she's saying that, one of the things that happens is you basically get this prophecy, right? Now, what had happened here somewhere along the line is you had what was called Idle the Seer, right? She's basically Uranos' version of Destiny from the X-Men comics on Krakoa. She can see the future, and she's an Omega level mutant. The difference here is that she at some point lost her tongue, and so she can't actually speak what it is that she sees. They kind of rely on her silence, right? The kind of silent messages she conveys in order to interpret things. And so what had happened is she had basically revealed a prophecy, right? She says, an empty heart beats hardest, an empty hand deals the impossible blow, and the stalemate ends with victory's loss. That prophecy is probably going to become incredibly important later on down the line. It will become important for this segment here, but that may end up playing like a major role over the course of the story. But again, these guys don't know that they're on a timetable, right? 1 minute, 49 seconds, 48 seconds, 30 seconds, right? The clock is counting down. And it's one of those things where they're just kind of having this conversation like, okay, well, I mean, who in the world are we going to send? You know, and it's just, for them, it's just kind of general business for the Great Circle. But then suddenly a blue light emanates out of nowhere. And they're like, what in the hell is that? And that's when you get the arrival of Uranos. Now, one of the things that happens here is they say, okay, the war has reached our doorsteps. What's the chance that we have of winning? And Iska turns on them and then kills one of the members of the Great Circle. Now, one of the things to remember, Iska the Unbeaten can never lose. Her mutant power is that whatever she does will basically guarantee her victory, or guarantee the victory of the side she's on. Now, it can be manipulated. That's what we saw when we had that tournament that was going on before, when you had that fight taking place between Scar and you had Magneto. So like, it can be manipulated, it can be tricked. In this instance though, what she's doing is designed to illustrate that they're all going to die, right? They're all basically going to fall. Now, the only person who really looks at the situation and comes to the realization that the only way to truly win is to defeat Iska, right? To basically kill Iska, the Nightcrawler teleports over and then takes her off the board with the intention of basically taking her out. But when that happens, once he teleports away with Iska, then you've got the arrival of Uranos, right? The grandfather of Thanos. Now, here's the thing that I want to make this perfectly clear. When it comes to Uranos, he's one of the OG Eternals, the original Eternals, old school, right? Depending on how Marvel does this, it could very well be that Uranos is more powerful than Thanos. But he literally says says like mutants, you have excess, like you are excessively deviating and I have 1 hour to correct you. Because remember, mutants are basically the result of the deviant gene entering the human bloodstream. It's one of the great big huge changes that Marvel's making, which I absolutely love. I think it's one of the coolest things, but it's kind of nuts because within the span of 30 seconds, Uranos kills 11,000 mutants like that. Right, in the span of 30 seconds. And the way in which he does this is that it's not simply just an attack on Arakko. One of the things that had happened here is that Druig, who's currently the Prime Eternal, when he released Uranos, he also released his weapons cache. And so what's happening here is that Earth and Mars are not the only places across the universe where mutants reside, that some of those mutants from Arakko actually left Mars and took off into the universe. They created settlements on other planets, different things like that. And so what you have is the forces of Uranos, albeit, you know, autonomous drones or what have you, who are showing up at these different locations and eradicating all these mutants in all these places. For example, in the skies above Port Prometheus, that's where these things show up, right? In these locations, all these different spots, right? The Valley of the Fallen and so on and so forth, different places across the universe. So in a lot of ways, it is quite literally a universe-wide conflict. Now, one of the crazy things that goes on is that 6 minutes into this, right? This is 6 minutes in, that what you have here is Aura Serrata that uses her eye on Uranos. Now, one of the things to remember is that Aura Serrata is an Omega level mutant that when she looks at something, they basically cease to exist. She's essentially an ultimate nullifier, right? Literally, it's as if they never existed in the first place. It doesn't work on Uranos. It has no effect on him whatsoever. And so for whatever reason that's not explained here, this guy survives the entire experience and then takes Aura out. Following that, one of the things that happens, and this is a crazy moment, which I hope we actually get to see later on down the line, Legion shows up. Now, Legion showing up here, here's the thing to remember. When you're facing off against Legion, you're not just fighting one Omega level mutant, you're fighting a legion of Omega level mutants, right? You're just fighting as many powers as he has, because remember, Legion has all kinds of personalities. There's Susan and Sunshine, there's the Origamist, there's all kinds of people there, right? There's all kinds of abilities that can manipulate people in differing ways when these different personalities take over. Legion himself, just David Haller on his own, is an Omega level telepath and telekinetic. He's wildly powerful. The downside to this is that we basically end up seeing Uranos take off with Legion, the two of them fight, and then Uranos comes back. Literally the next page, we don't actually see what happens between the two of them in this conflict, but nonetheless, this is when you get to see like the full-on power of Magneto and like one of the greatest moments in the history of Magneto. So one of the things that goes on here, right? God, this is ridiculously amazing. One of the things that happens here, right? While you have literally these forces that are going through, right? These forces of Uranos that are attacking in all these different locations, you have the forces of Arakko that are fending off as best they can, and then you actually have Richard Rider Nova, who's actually helping to defend the Arakko mutants to the best of his ability, but ultimately he just can't seem to pull it off, right? He just doesn't have the power to do it on his own. I mean, he can hold off, but in the end, like, ultimately these mutants are going to fall. But one of the things that happens is that Magneto enlists Lotus Logos. Now, this guy is ridiculously cool. This guy can manipulate any form of metal in existence, and in fact, he can actually produce metal from his own physical body, which in doing so, Magneto just enlists that ability from him, right? Like this guy's feeding Magneto metal, and Magneto is using it on Uranos and literally just like puncturing this guy, trying to encase this guy, the whole 9 yards, literally wraps him in metal shards, keeping this guy held in place, and Uranos breaks out of it anyway, right? Like this is 13 minutes in. These guys are falling like flies, and in fact, Uranos walks up on Magneto and just punches a hole in his chest and kills Magneto on the spot. And so one of the things that happens is that Cable tells his computer, right? He says body slide by 0, weapon cache Omega 1. It's this weapon that he has, this giant gun, right? The Omega 1 pulse rifle that is the most powerful gun in Cable's arsenal. Now, one of the things to remember is this has to be provided in context, because on its own, it's just a giant gun that Cable has. Rahu, why is that special? Because one of the things to remember is that Cable comes from a time when Apocalypse rules the world. So this weapon was designed for the purpose and could have completely eradicated Apocalypse. Cable uses this and he fires it on Uranos and nothing happens, right? He keeps firing it to the point that it overheats and it doesn't affect Uranos at all. That's the power of Uranos, right? The fact that this weapon, which could just annihilate someone like Apocalypse who uses celestial technology, that it has no effect on this guy whatsoever. And the falls keep coming, right? Like the deaths just keep happening, that Uranos just keeps killing every single mutant he comes across, annihilates all of them. He takes out Abigail Brand. Now, here's the crazy thing. While all of this is happening, Fisher King is just observing, right? He's literally just in his home and he's aware of it taking place. Now remember, he's a baseline human, but the big on-running theory here is that Fisher King was not introduced for no reason. He was not introduced for no purpose at all. That in fact, in the face of all of this, right, the eradication of all these mutants that are dying across the entirety of Uraco, that Fisher King is going to basically activate a subsect, kind of like a fail-safe protocol for a handful of mutants that we simply just didn't know about. It's one of the things that people are speculating of is going to be a kind of like super secret inner circle, so kind of like a Black Ops team, which I'm excited to see if that's going to be the case. But one thing that I want to hit at here, Uranos had 1 hour to eradicate as many mutants as he possibly could on Uraco, to eradicate all of them, which includes a council full of Omega level mutants. He did it in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. He killed them all, every single one of them. Now, here's the crazy thing. We get this like amazing monologue, right? We're basically told that Uranos uses the remaining time well, right? T-minus 60 minutes, right? The hour is over. And it says, so is 98% of all life in a 50-mile radius. All these guys are basically dead, right? Uranos leaves satisfied. He is supremely confident in his ability to bring death. In all the ages, he has never felt the need to check his work. In this, he is foolish. He has spent the last hour on the planet Uraco, and on Uraco, you always make sure. And so one of the things that happens is we actually end up finding out that Lotus Logos had basically survived. Now, it wasn't just him, and in fact, he's told by some disembodied voice, forgive me, right? Like, I had to hide you. I had to hide you and keep you protected because you're the person that I have to keep alive in order to help me. And so in response to this, Lotus says, he challenged all of us. We cannot yield nor die too quickly. This way I fight again and take revenge for the bones that are all laid here. For all the people that Uranos killed, I'm going to get revenge. And the response here is no. Right? Do not do that. At the moment, we have to be alive. We have to marshal our forces. We have to find a way to strike back. If we do that now, we will all perish. We have to unify and we have to bring an end to all of this. Because literally Logos is just like, okay, so Aura Serrata is maimed only, right? Her eye is injured. In time, she can be healed and her power can be restored. And he says she has survived much worse, but her weapon will require healing. And Uranos' weapons will roam unchecked. We must strategize. And the response here is no, right? Such strategies are not the place for you, right? You are not the one running the show here anymore. In the end, I am the one who sits at the seat of loss, and the seat of loss now seizes control because this is a war and it's a war that we are losing. So if we are going to win, we have to follow a strategy that I have devised. Literally, Magneto survived having his heart ripped out. Now, this is the power of Magneto as an Omega level mutant. This guy, what it looks like he's doing here, because we're not given a definitive explanation, this guy literally looks like he's controlling the iron in his blood to keep his blood flowing, to keep his blood pumping so his body can function. Because remember, once the heart's gone, there's nothing to pump blood throughout the body. And so literally your organs, your brain, they don't get the blood you need and then you ultimately die. But by Magneto manipulating the iron in his blood and keeping his blood flowing, he keeps himself alive. That's the power of this guy. This dude has no heart in his chest. It's been ripped out of his body and he's keeping himself going. Not only that, there's two things to take away from this. The first is that Magneto is a master strategist. I mean, you're talking about a guy who has at different points in time over the course of his publication history taken on any combination of the Inhumans, which don't really matter because the Inhumans suck, the Avengers, the other X-Men, and even Eternals, and has won. He's done it several times over. This guy is a monster. Not only that, he controls the entirety of the electromagnetic spectrum. What we saw here is a taste of the full power Magneto has, and the reason for that is the second thing. Magneto is pissed. And you talk to anybody out there who knows anything about Magneto, and they will tell you, man, they will tell you, son, when Magneto gets pissed, oh, dude, when Magneto gets angry, that's when the war just begins. With that being said, guys, we're bringing this video to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.